Hi, I'm Carrie Penny. On this episode of Secret Heart Broadcasting, Tropical Bird in a Snowstorm with Nina Sudra. Nina's a filmmaker, a friend, a bright light. She also comes from a traditional Indian culture, yet grew up kind of footloose and fancy-free on the prairies. So we'll find out about love for your family, love for your ancestors, love for yourself. We'll also talk about books, filmmaking, and a whole lot more with Nina Sudra on Tropical Bird in a Snowstorm, coming up next on Secret Heart Broadcasting.
So I think that probably part of the reason why I was so ecstatic and excited is because I was in a space and time where I could start to really design my life. So my family was incredibly conservative, really strict. I come from, should I go all the way? Should I start from the beginning?
As far back as you want to go.
Oh, well, and about, 20 million years ago. No. In this lifetime, I was born to two beautiful, wonderful human beings that had quite the journeys themselves. So I'll go back to my grandparents. So my grandparents on both sides were all born in India, in Gujarat, where Gandhi's from.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, there was like the empire was happening. So the British were, were colonized, or India was colonized by the British, and also, the East Africa also was fully colonized by the British. So they needed people to work in East Africa. And a lot of folks from the part of India that I'm from were being offered opportunity to go to East Africa. So my grandparents, both sides, there's kind of a mass of South Asians that basically migrated to East Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda in particular. My grandparents were part of that migration. And so they had my parents in different countries. So my mom's from Kenya. My dad was born in Uganda. They grew up in these South Asian enclaves. And they were, it was a beautiful mix of Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, all living together and actually living harmoniously and beautifully together. Like they're still very close family friends from all of those different religious backgrounds. My parents were raised there. It was like paradise. It was magical. They had a great time. They got engaged, and then what happened was the Idi Amin thing happened. So he was this crazy dictator that basically took over, did a coup d'etat in Uganda, and had said, if you are South Asian, you need to get out of the country in a particular amount of days. And if you don't, you will be...
So, and this was in the 70s, right?
This was in the 70s. Yeah, it was like 1972.
Yep.
So my dad, and he was the eldest in the family. He got pretty much the whole family out. They all went to most of them actually were able to go to England because they carried British passports as well. But my dad didn't have a British passport, and he had to rip up all of his statements, and so he had to become stateless. And then he basically has this dramatic story in his life of, machine gun pointed to his head. Do you get on the UN plane, or what do you do? So he got on a United Nations plane that took him to Canada. And he saved up money. My mom came over. They got married in a basement in Calgary.
Wow.
Which, is quite the story. And the way that my parents were brought up was kind of like in a frozen time warp. So they were being raised by my grandparents who had been basically taken or were left India, this village kind of mentality in the turn of the century. So late 1900s, village India mentality to East Africa. And then my parents were brought up in that very similar conservative way. And then life gets flipped upside down. They end up in Canada. And then a few years later,
A free spirit is born.
yes,
Mm.
magic has entered the earth. No, I'm joking. But, I was born in Calgary, and that's kind of how my journey began. And so
Mhm.
anyway, my upbringing was this like turn of the century, late 1900s village mentality, growing up in this very foreign, very strange country where my mom in particular did not have very much support. She didn't have her family here. Her mom wasn't here. Everyone was in England or in Kenya.
Mhm.
So so her story is really interesting, and I think the more and more, the older I got, the more I was able to understand that. So anyway, growing up was really tricky. It was balancing two cultures and being one thing at home and another thing when I walked out the door, and who am I, and fitting in here but not really fitting in there, and feeling just I felt very torn a lot, but
Mhm.
also just found a way to be like, oh, I guess this is, kind of I think I was kind of a strange, eccentric, super fun and awesome kid.
And having to adapt, right? And especially I think about the teenage years when, as much as we might want to think of ourselves as rebels, really, teenagers are programmed to, fit in, find a tribe and fit in. Like you don't want to stand out. And maybe I'm superimposing my experience of being a teenager. I'm that much older than you. But I just think about, people are like, oh, I would love to be young again. You could not pay me enough money to go back to high school. Because I think it was just so much, the stakes about belonging were so high. Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, I don't know,
yeah,
did you feel that?
I totally felt that. I totally felt that. But I also felt like, I think that I realized at a really young age that I'm not going to get that. Like, I'm probably not going to fit in. I really tried hard, and when I tried super, super hard, it was so, so unauthentic to who I was,
Hmm. Mhm.
like, it was just like, "Okay, I'm gonna try to be like, like everybody else," and it was, like, soul crushing, so I was just like, "You know what? I'm I just have to embrace this kind of whatever this is." And, I was really lucky. I had some I think I did meet really some amazing souls along the way, and, but I yeah, I think that it's really hard. And, the other thing is that culturally, you're like, you saw on TV, like everyone, all your, on those TV shows, like you've got like the kids who all have that little group, that little like,
Mhm.
the little clique. And I'm like, I don't, I don't have a clique. I don't have a little group.
Mhm.
But then the other thing was I kind of really liked hanging out with everyone. Like I liked sampling all of the different cool folks out there. I think that,
Yeah.
you know
And I love when you talked about you were sort of almost forced to be authentic. Like it was you. You had to, being not you was not working. So you learned early on that you just had to be yourself in the world, which some people take, that sometimes that never happens. So and that's one thing I love and admire about you. You are completely who you are in the world. And I love
Oh,
that.
thank you, but
You're
it
welcome.
can be brutal and painful and hard.
Oh, yeah.
I got this story. I want to share this story. This is an interesting story I was in grade, I think I was in grade 6. Okay, so I was, like, pretty, like, woo, like, happy-go-lucky, sang a lot,
Mhm.
um, just kind of, like, especially at school, because at home I don't know, I felt like I had to sort of shift a bit at home. So at school, I was like, "Woohoo!" And there was this point when the girls in the school, the girls in my class, they decided to do an intervention. I know this is such a true story. So, so they all surround me. I mean, you could not seriously, you couldn't write this. You wouldn't believe it. And I'm in this sort of huddled circle, and I'm in the middle, and they're like, "We want you to," and like, they're like, "Look, we really care about you, and we just feel like you really need to start acting like yourself. Like, stop trying to be something you're not." And I think it was because I can be, or maybe, I don't know, back then I was very performative,
Mhm.
and I was like, I felt like I always liked making people laugh, and so I was really super performative,
Mhm.
and maybe it kind of made like it's probably over the top. Okay, looking back at it, it's probably really over
Hindsight, grade 6, Calgary.
the top. 6, Calgary, like Indian girl who is in. We also went to Catholic school, so like was born as a Hindu. That's kind of my lens, is like a Hindu lens. And then I went to a Catholic school from kindergarten to grade 9. So, like there's going to be some stuff. But it was so funny. And I just was like, okay, you're right. You're right. You're right. I'm going to try to be more normal. Normal being like more serious, more like, subdued, calmer, like the way an adult would be. Boring. So boring. And I tried really hard to be like that, but it felt it was so depressing. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Is something wrong with me? And I was like, screw this. And it lasted for maybe a few days. And
Mm.
I didn't know. Sorry, I guess I'm just nuts.
Well, and we're hearing so much about that now in, a lot of kind of, I want to say self-help literature, but, when uh, there's an uncomfortableness in being yourself fully authentically in the world. It can make people want you to, take down those edges. I mean, good Lord, 100 years ago, you might have been diagnosed with hysteria, and, there's wow, all kinds of ways to take the shine off of, you
Oh
know,
my God,
off of
totally.
life, and yeah, and you would have none of it, which made you, I think, quite creative. Therein lies the recipe. I mean, maybe things happen for a reason. I don't know. We can talk about that, but you could, of course you're going to be creative. Of course you're going to make things. How could you not? Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please tell your friends.